Title: She answered a call in Polish in front of a billionaire patient, and the next day, she lost her job. Part 1. The Whisper in the Glass. Word count: 970. It was nearly midnight when the nurse pushed a cart down the dimly lit hallway of Westmount Asylum. The ancient psychiatric hospital had long since been decommissioned, now converted into a private facility for long-term psychological cases. A quiet place no one talked about, where people with money sent the problems they didn't want the world to see. The nurse had worked night shifts here for nearly 3 years. She liked the silence, the calm, the way shadows stretched and curled down the marble corridors like sleeping cats. But tonight, something felt different. She paused outside room 306. The thick iron door stood ajar. That was unusual. Every room in Westmount had 2 locks, one internal, and one only staff could open. And Edward Langston, the man inside, wasn't allowed outside without sedation. Her heart skipped. She hesitated. "Mr. Langston," she called softly, nudging the door further open with her elbow. Her cart creaked behind her, the sound unusually loud in the silence. Edward Langston was sitting upright on the edge of his bed, dressed in the standard pale blue patient gown. His eyes were fixed on the far wall, unmoving, unblinking. The nurse stepped in carefully. "You're not supposed to be up this late. And the door, how did you unlock it?" He didn't respond. His lips were trembling slightly, whispering something she couldn't hear. She moved closer, frowning. "Are you all right, Edward?" Finally, he turned. And something in his expression made her stop. His eyes weren't frantic or wild like they often were. Tonight, they were hollow, focused, as if he was seeing something far away, or something right behind her. "She's awake," he murmured. She froze. "Who's awake?" "The woman in the mirror." The nurse followed his gaze. The wall he'd been staring at had a single rectangular mirror mounted above the sink. It was fogged with moisture from earlier showers, streaked from age, and cracked at the bottom right corner. She saw nothing but her own reflection, a tired woman in scrubs, her badge hanging askew. Nothing else. She gave a small, forced smile. "There's no one there, Edward. Maybe you had a bad dream." He didn't blink. "She never sleeps. You don't hear her, do you? She talks to me. All night. She scratches when you're not looking." The nurse felt the hairs on her neck prickle. She'd heard Edward talk about her before, always in whispers, always with that same eerily calm tone. "She says you're next," Edward added softly. She straightened, deciding to cut the visit short. "Okay, we'll talk more in the morning. Try to get some rest, all right?" She turned to leave, only to find the door had swung shut behind her. She hadn't touched it. For a moment, panic surged through her chest. She reached for the handle and yanked it open quickly. Cold air poured into the room from the hallway. The nurse didn't believe in ghosts. She was a science-minded woman. A nurse. Rational. But she knew what she felt. And right now, she felt watched. Back in the hallway, she called maintenance and reported the faulty door. But as she pushed her cart back toward the central station, her thoughts kept circling Edward's words. "She never sleeps. She scratches when you're not looking." At 2:17 a.m., the nurse sat at the desk, sipping stale coffee from a paper cup. She tapped into the system and pulled up Edward's file. He'd been admitted 2 years ago after a complete psychological breakdown. Before that, he had been a professor of art history at Kingsley University. No prior criminal record. No history of mental illness. His breakdown had happened suddenly, triggered, according to his initial report, by a mirror. There was even a note in his file from the intake psychiatrist. Patient reports auditory and visual hallucinations linked to reflective surfaces. Claims to see another version of reality inside mirrors. Prescribed heavy antipsychotics. Responds poorly to sedatives. She stared at the screen for a moment, then opened a web browser and typed, "Mirrors and psychological hallucinations." Most of the articles were dry, clinical. But one caught her attention: the mirror phenomenon, ancient beliefs and modern cases. It detailed a string of historical incidents where individuals claimed to see or hear voices through mirrors. In some rare cases, patients reported seeing themselves, but altered, darker, smiling when they weren't. She closed the tab, suddenly uncomfortable. She stood and decided to take one last round before her shift ended. As she walked past room 306 again, she paused. Edward was still awake. Still sitting. Still staring. Except now, he was smiling. She slowly approached the glass panel in the door and looked in. Edward raised his hand and pointed, not at her, but to the mirror again. And this time, the nurse thought she saw something. Just for a moment. A flash of movement. A smile that didn't match hers. And then it was gone. Part 2. The Mirror That Watches Back. Word count: 1480. The morning sun filtered weakly through Westmount Asylum's east windows, casting long, pale streaks across the tiled floor. The nurse hadn't slept. Her mind replayed the moment again and again, the image in the mirror. The impossible second where her reflection didn't feel like her own. And Edward's words, echoing like a curse. She says you're next. At 7 a.m., she handed over her notes to the day staff. But as she prepared to leave, her eyes returned to room 306. Edward Langston, former professor, formerly sane. Now just another case in a forgotten hospital with a locked door and too many secrets. She lingered outside his room. The morning shift nurse, a younger woman named Alina, gave her a puzzled look. You okay? Alina asked, tucking a tablet under her arm. The nurse nodded absently. Yeah, just weird night. 306 giving you trouble. The nurse hesitated. He said he sees someone in the mirror. A woman, talking to him, watching him. Alina rolled her eyes. That guy talks to a toothbrush if you let him. He once said the tiles were whispering Latin at him. But that was the thing. Edward hadn't been frantic. He'd been calm, precise, too lucid. The nurse clocked out and exited the facility into the crisp October air. Westmount stood at the edge of a wooded area, its grey stone walls buried beneath ivy and decades of silence. As she reached her car, she glanced up toward the third floor. Room 306. Just a square of shadow. She went home, showered, tried to sleep. But dreams came instead, disjointed fragments of a room that wasn't hers, a mirror that wouldn't reflect correctly, and a whisper that slipped beneath the skin. That evening, against her better judgment, she returned an hour early for her next shift. Something inside her itched, some mix of curiosity and dread that she couldn't shake. She stopped at the main desk and asked, casually, "Any updates on Edward Langston?" The receptionist shrugged. "Same old. He didn't sleep last night. He's been staring at the wall all day. Refused lunch. Anyone check his mirror?" "His what?" "Never mind." By 11:45 p.m., the halls were nearly silent again. The nurse walked slowly toward room 306. Her shoes echoed across the linoleum, too loud in the quiet. She found Edward sitting as he had the night before, statue still, facing the mirror. She unlocked the door and stepped inside. He didn't acknowledge her. "You haven't slept," she said. "No." "You didn't eat." "No." "Why?" He spoke without turning. "She doesn't want me to close my eyes." The nurse swallowed. "What does she want?" "She wants out." She approached the mirror cautiously. The cracks in the corner had grown longer. Odd. She was sure they hadn't stretched this far yesterday. She leaned in slightly, studying her own reflection. Everything looked normal. Tired eyes, pale face, a hairline crease between her brows. Then the light flickered. And her reflection didn't. Her breath caught in her throat. For a full second, her reflected self remained completely still. Not blinking, not swaying, even as she recoiled. Then, slowly, it smiled. Just a twitch at the corners. A knowing, cruel grin that didn't belong on her face. And then it was gone. Just her again. The nurse stumbled back. What is this?" Edward finally turned toward her. "She can see you now." Later that night, she sat in the staff lounge, hands trembling around a coffee cup. She wasn't imagining it. She knew what she saw. It wasn't a trick of the light, and it wasn't a hallucination. She grabbed her phone and called an old friend, Marcus Leclerc, a psychologist she'd once worked with at a hospital in Queens. He picked up on the third ring. "Didn't expect a midnight call," he said, voice groggy. "I need your help." "With?" "Mirrors," she said, voice thin. "Excuse me." She told him everything. Edward's behavior, the mirror, the reflection that smiled when she didn't. There was a long silence. Then Marcus said quietly, "Have you heard of the Glassman theory?" "No." "It's fringe psychology. A man named Dr. Harold Glass. He believed that certain patients weren't hallucinating. They were perceiving a layer of consciousness that existed behind reflective surfaces. Not metaphorically. Literally. He claimed some people were more sensitive to it, like a visual schizophrenia, but instead of internal voices, they see entities using reflections as windows." The nurse stared at the wall. "Do you think Edward is one of them?" "I think you need to remove every reflective surface from his room," Marcus said. She thanked him and hung up. That night, at 2:30 a.m., she brought a small toolkit and returned to room 306. Edward didn't look at her as she stepped inside. "I'm taking the mirror out," she said firmly. "No," he whispered. "She'll follow you if you take it." "I don't care." The nurse pried the mirror from the wall. It was heavier than it looked. Behind it, the drywall was cracked in a spiderweb pattern, as though someone had pounded against it from the other side. She carried the mirror into the storage room and laid it face down on a wooden shelf. As she turned to leave, she caught a flash of movement behind her. Her reflection, in another mirror at the end of the hall, was standing still, watching. Over the next 2 nights, things escalated. The nurse began seeing glimpses of that same smile in reflective surfaces, in the glass of the vending machine, in the metallic shine of an 4-pump, in the window of the supply closet. She stopped looking at herself altogether. Meanwhile, Edward began to deteriorate. He refused food. His hands trembled constantly. He spoke only in riddles. "She's not behind the glass anymore," he whispered. "She's inside the cracks." On the 4th night, a scream echoed down the hallway. The nurse ran toward it, followed by 2 orderlies. The sound came from room 309. They found the patient there, an elderly woman with dementia, standing barefoot in the center of the room, blood trailing from her palms. The mirror above her sink was shattered. "She told me to break it," the woman mumbled. "She said she was tired of being looked at." The nurse's blood ran cold. She reported the incident. The asylum's director dismissed it as coincidence, called in maintenance, and replaced the mirror. That night, the nurse refused to go near room 306. But the next morning, she found a note slid beneath the nurse's station door. It was written in precise, neat handwriting. "She knows your name now." Part 3, Beyond the Mirror. Word count, 1150. The morning at the asylum had arrived, but the air felt strangely heavy. Emily started her shift, noticing that many patients seemed more restless than usual, as if something had stolen their sleep. But one patient, Maya, was completely silent, more so than usual. Emily walked into Maya's room, where she sat once again in front of the same old cracked mirror. "Why do you keep staring at it?" Emily asked softly. Maya looked up at her with a faint smile, her eyes distant. "Because it's watching me." Emily felt a chill run down her spine. Who's watching you?" Maya's eyes seemed to empty, her voice a whisper. "The one inside, beyond the mirror." Emily stared at the mirror for a long moment. It looked old and cloudy, but there was something unsettling about it. Something that didn't feel quite right. "What do you mean? What's inside?" Maya's gaze shifted, not towards Emily, but through her, as though she could see something no one else could. "It's not just a reflection. It's something more. Something that waits. It calls to me." Emily stepped closer, trying to understand, but all she could feel was a growing sense of dread. The mirror, it was like it had a life of its own. As the night fell, Emily couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. She had to speak to the warden. "This mirror, it's odd. I think we should remove it," Emily said, her voice low with concern. The warden gave her a small, strange smile. "That mirror has been here for decades, Emily. It's part of the building. It was removed once, but we had to bring it back." Emily furrowed her brow. "Why? What's wrong with it?" The warden's smile faded. "There's nothing wrong with it. It's just old. You should get some rest, Emily." But Emily couldn't rest. Not with that mirror, not after what Maya had said. She walked back to Maya's room that night, determined to check again. When she opened the door, her heart stopped. Maya was sitting in the same spot, but now she wasn't staring at the mirror. Her eyes were locked onto Emily, her expression cold. "Maya," Emily said, stepping inside. "Where's the mirror?" It was just here." Maya didn't respond. Emily turned her gaze toward the wall, expecting to see the cracked mirror, but instead, there was just an empty space. The wall was bare. "Maya, where did it go?" Emily's voice trembled. Maya slowly turned her head and looked directly at Emily. It took it to the other side." Emily felt the air around her thicken. "What do you mean, took it?" Maya's lips parted into a slow, eerie smile. "The one who waits, he came through. He's here. And now, you're going to see him too." Emily stepped back, the blood draining from her face. "What are you talking about? Where's the mirror? What's happening?" Maya tilted her head, her eyes growing darker with something far more sinister. "He's behind you, Emily. He's been watching you." Emily whipped around, but the room was empty. The silence was overwhelming, but she could still feel something, or someone, in the room with her. She stumbled backward, almost tripping over her own feet. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt eyes on her. Every noise, every shadow seemed to be closing in. She tossed and turned, unable to escape the feeling of being watched. And then, in the deepest part of the night, she heard it, a soft whisper, almost imperceptible, like a breath near her ear. "You'll see him too, Emily. You're next." The next morning, when Emily entered Maya's room, she was gone. The bed was empty, and the room was eerily quiet. She called for the nurse, who only shook her head. "She left last night," the nurse said, sounding confused. "She's gone. We don't know where." Emily's heart raced. Gone? But where did she go? The nurse looked through the records, her brow furrowing. Maya died here 3 months ago. She took her own life in this room, by the mirror. Emily felt like the room was spinning. No, that's impossible. I've been talking to her. I saw her last night. The nurse handed Emily a death certificate, dated months earlier, confirming what she had just heard. Maya committed suicide. She killed herself. She cut her wrists with the shards of the broken mirror. Emily's hands trembled as she looked at the certificate. But I spoke to her. She was here. The nurse didn't seem to understand. She can't be here, Emily. She's been dead for months. Suddenly, the warden entered the room. He looked at Emily with a strange expression, his face hardening as he glanced at the empty bed. What's going on? Emily couldn't answer. She just stared at the empty spot where Maya had been. And all at once, she understood. The mirror, it had taken something from her. Something that couldn't be explained. And now it was calling to Emily too. The whispering voice, so soft, echoed again in her mind. You'll be mine soon, Emily. You'll see what I've seen. Part 4. The Depths of the Unknown. Word count, 2000. The days blurred together after that night. Emily couldn't shake the image of Maya, or the unsettling realization that something far darker than she had ever imagined was now part of her reality. She had tried to push the experience from her mind, focusing on her work, but it was impossible. The whispers, the voices, the creeping sense of being watched, they never stopped. The feeling that something was wrong with the asylum, with the mirror, it gnawed at her like an itch she couldn't reach. Emily began to see things she couldn't explain. At night, she would hear footsteps echoing down the halls, but when she looked, no one was there. There were faint, dark smudges on the walls that couldn't be wiped away, no matter how hard she scrubbed. And then, the dream started. In them, she was trapped in the mirror. Her own reflection, no longer a simple copy, but something darker, something twisted. It would reach out to her, its hands clawing at the glass, its eyes empty and cold. It would whisper to her in a voice she could almost recognize, a voice that sounded like her own. One night, unable to sleep, Emily wandered the halls, seeking answers. She couldn't explain the sensation, but there was something compelling her to go to the basement, to the old storage room where the asylum's secrets were kept. The basement was colder than the rest of the building, the air thick with the scent of mildew and decay. The walls were lined with shelves stacked with dusty boxes and forgotten records. Emily felt a strange chill run down her spine as she moved deeper into the room. There was something unsettling about it, something hidden. She was about to turn back when she noticed something on the far side of the room. A wooden chest, old and worn, its edges cracked from years of neglect. She wasn't sure why, but something urged her to open it. Her fingers trembled as she lifted the heavy lid, revealing a collection of old papers, photographs, and medical records. One photograph caught her eye. It was an image of a woman, standing in front of a cracked mirror. Emily felt her heart skip a beat. The woman in the photo was familiar, though she couldn't place why. She reached out and touched the photograph, and as her fingers brushed the surface, a shiver of recognition swept through her. The woman's eyes in the photo were exactly the same as the one she had seen in Maya's reflection. Empty, hollow, lost. Her face was gaunt, her features twisted in a way that made Emily feel nauseous. She scanned the other papers, but nothing could have prepared her for what she found next. A record, written in faded ink, describing the asylum's first patients. And one name stood out. Dr. Sylvia Markham, psychiatrist, 1947. The words hit Emily like a punch to the stomach. Dr. Sylvia Markham? That name. It sounded too familiar, as if it belonged to someone from her past, someone she couldn't quite remember. She continued reading, her eyes racing down the page. Dr. Markham was the lead psychiatrist at Willowbrook Asylum. In 1947, she conducted an experimental procedure that altered the mind of one patient in particular, a young woman named Eleanor. Eleanor became obsessed with mirrors, claiming that she could see the spirits of the dead in them. Dr. Markham was fascinated by Eleanor's condition and began performing dangerous experiments, attempting to unlock the secrets of the mind. Emily's pulse quickened as she read further. After months of manipulation, Eleanor began to lose her sense of self. Her reflection became a separate entity, one that took on a life of its own. The doctors believed they had broken through to something profound, something supernatural. But what they failed to realize was that they had opened a doorway into something far more sinister. Eleanor's reflection became her tormentor, calling to her, dragging her closer to madness. It wasn't long before she disappeared. Emily's hands shook as she read the last lines. Some say Eleanor never truly left. Her spirit still haunts Willowbrook, waiting for the next victim. The mirror is her gateway. Emily slammed the papers down, a cold sweat forming on her brow. The story sounded too familiar. Dr. Sylvia Markham, Eleanor, the mirror, they were all connected. And now, Emily felt the weight of it pressing on her. The realization struck her like a bolt of lightning. Maya's death, the strange things happening to her, the whispers in her mind, they were all a part of it. The mirror, the reflection, it wasn't just a superstition. It was real. And it had chosen her. With trembling hands, Emily closed the chest and hurried back upstairs. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something was following her. The air in the asylum seemed to grow heavier, suffocating her with its oppressive weight. When she reached her room, she locked the door behind her and collapsed onto the bed, her mind racing. It wasn't until the next day that Emily found out the truth. She was called into the warden's office, his face grim, his voice low. "Emily, we need to talk." "What's going on?" Emily asked, her heart pounding in her chest. The warden handed her a file, the contents sealed in an envelope. "This is a copy of Dr. Markham's research. I'm not supposed to give it to you, but you need to know what's been happening here." Emily opened the file and began to read. The truth was more terrifying than she had ever imagined. The asylum had been involved in secret experiments, trying to unlock the power of the human mind. But instead, they had opened a portal to something darker. Dr. Markham had known it all along. She had used the mirrors to communicate with whatever was on the other side, bringing it into the world, using the patients as conduits. The spirits in the mirrors were real, and they were waiting for Emily. Part 5. The Final Reflection. Word count, 2000. Emily's mind raced as the weight of the warden's words settled over her. The truth was clear now. The asylum, its twisted history, the mirrors, and the spirits, it was all connected. She wasn't just a victim of an unfortunate series of events. She was part of something much bigger, something that had been set in motion long before she ever stepped foot in Willowbrook. Dr. Markham's experiments had opened a rift, a crack in the boundary between the living world and something else, something that waited in the mirrors. Emily couldn't shake the chilling thought. The spirits weren't trapped in the glass. They were using it to get to her, to drag her into their world. After the warden left her alone with the file, Emily sat in stunned silence, staring at the pages before her. She had learned the truth about Dr. Sylvia Markham's twisted experiments, but there was no way she could undo what had already been done. The spirits were no longer just haunting the asylum. They were part of it now, embedded into the walls, into the very foundation of Willowbrook. The door to her room creaked open. Emily's breath hitched. She hadn't heard anyone coming, and the hairs on the back of her neck stood up. She turned slowly, expecting to see the warden or perhaps a colleague. But what she saw made her blood run cold. Maya stood in the doorway, her expression blank, her body faintly glowing in the dim light of the room. Her eyes, once lifeless, now seemed to be full of purpose. A cold smile curled at her lips. "Maya!" Emily whispered, her voice trembling. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. It was impossible. Maya had died. But as Emily looked closer, she saw the truth. This wasn't Maya. Not anymore. "I'm not Maya," the figure said, its voice a twisted echo of the nurse's. "I'm what remains." The reflection, the spirit that had once been trapped in the mirror, had found a way out. It had become something else, something far darker. Emily tried to step back, but her feet felt like they were glued to the floor. The spirit's smile widened, and for a moment, Emily saw the shadow of something far older, far more ancient, lurking behind its eyes. "It's too late, Emily," the spirit whispered. "You're part of it now. There's no going back." The room seemed to close in on Emily. The air grew thick and oppressive, the walls pulsing with an eerie energy. The mirrors on the wall, once merely reflective, now appeared to be alive, their surfaces swirling with darkness, pulling at her. The floor beneath her feet shifted, and the room seemed to tilt, as if she was falling into the mirror itself. But Emily wasn't ready to surrender. She remembered the one thing she had learned during her time at Willowbrook. The reflection could be defeated. It was the one truth Dr. Markham had failed to comprehend. The mind had the power to break the connection between the living and the spirits trapped within the mirrors. Emily's pulse raced as she gathered every ounce of courage. She wasn't going to let the mirror win. She wasn't going to become just another forgotten soul, trapped in a world of glass and shadow. Without thinking, she bolted toward the mirror in the far corner of the room. The mirror that had always seemed different, the one she had avoided for so long. It was the source of all the strange occurrences, the one that had pulled Maya into its depths. She could feel it now, pulling at her, trying to reach into her mind. Emily slammed her hands against the mirror, her heart pounding in her chest. "No," she shouted, forcing every ounce of willpower she could muster into her voice. "You will not control me." The reflection of her face distorted, twisted into something grotesque, but Emily didn't flinch. She focused on the one thing she knew. She was not like them. She had the power to break the curse, to sever the connection. As her hands pressed harder against the mirror, she felt something shift. The air around her grew lighter, the pressure in her chest slowly easing. The dark figure of Maya, or whatever it had become, screamed as the mirror began to crack. And then, with a deafening crash, the mirror shattered, shards of glass scattering across the room like rain. The spirits, the voices, the whispers, they all vanished. The air cleared, and the room felt normal again. Emily sank to her knees, exhausted, but victorious. She had done it. She had broken the curse. It was over, or so she thought. As she stood up, wiping the glass shards from her skin, Emily noticed something chilling. The reflection in the shattered mirror wasn't gone. It was still there, lingering in the broken pieces. And this time, it wasn't her reflection staring back at her. It was Dr. Sylvia Markham. Her cold, calculating eyes fixed on Emily from within the fractured shards. The asylum had claimed another soul, and the mirror was waiting for the next.